Hello viewers and welcome to yet another video. Students have been asking, and so I thought it would be useful to make a walkthrough about this. And what is it? What's the topic? Well, the topic here is how can you better ensure that your written language is both academic and professional? In essence, you can do so by avoiding contractions, using academic vocabulary and grammar, by using correct sentence structure, and by using correct paragraph structuring. Now, I won't talk in this video about sentence structure because I have other videos on my YouTube channel that explain that, as well as paragraph structuring. This can be viewed in other videos. However, I would like to talk about these two elements. So let's do that. First, avoiding contractions. Well, these forms that are contracted with an apostrophe are appropriate for spoken English. Things like advertising, just anything that's less formal or less academic, less professional. These are fine. But for academic style, you need to write the words out separately. We want the whole word forms. Now, of course, when you're writing an academic paper or essay, quite often it's easy to write them like this, or it's just something you do by habit, but it does require then proofreading, reading through your work to make sure you haven't used contractions. Okay, using academic vocabulary and grammar is more involved. Now, this may look familiar from another video I have. I will briefly give you an overview. Last winter I went to Spain. I had a great time. I met really interesting people. Well, this communicates the idea just fine, but it doesn't sound very academic or very professional. It sounds neutral to casual. So how can we then up the level of academic tone? Well, one way to do that is by combining sentences with commas, making compound sentences, more complex sentences. Last winter I went to Spain, where I had a very enjoyable time. And instead of words like great or really, here we've used enjoyable, truly. Now already that sounds more professional. And if you want to take it to the next level, last winter I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Spain. Again, this is just more sort of specific vocabulary. It's more complex grammar, where I had a truly enjoyable experience, as well as an opportunity to meet some extremely interesting people. Students often ask me, isn't this sentence too long? No, not for academic level English. Complex sentences like this are acceptable as long as they're grammatically accurate. Let's take a look at an example of a written form that sounds rather conversational in tone. And let's see how we can improve it or tweak it to make it sound more advanced and academic. Okay. I asked around to my colleagues about how they handled teaching to their classes. It seemed I was not the only one with a problem. They didn't have an answer to my problem, but I did feel better because now I knew I wasn't the only one with this problem. Then I decided to give my pupils a questionnaire with questions on how to make the English lessons more easy and more fun for them. Again, this was a teacher in training that I worked with, and this was a reflection on her own teaching that she had written. She's able to communicate the ideas very clearly, but the level of academic tone is low. It sounds like she's talking to us in conversation. So how can we improve on it? Well, instead of writing, I asked around. I inquired amongst my colleagues as to, instead of about how they handled, as to how they managed to succeed in teaching English to their students. Not handle teaching. That sounds like oh, I don't know, that it's a difficult task that has to be handled, whereas instead this makes it sound like how they manage to succeed is a much more specific and positive sound. And they don't teach to their classes, they teach English to their students. So we can see here the more advanced level writing is more specific as well. Teaching what? Teaching English. To whom? To their students. And again, here we have a complex sentence with a comma. And it quickly became evident that I was not the only one with this problem. So it quickly became evident. Here we have a nice linker. Unfortunately, my colleagues did not have a ready solution. However, I did feel better knowing I was not the only one facing this particular difficulty. What we've done here is varied the vocabulary. Here we've got problem, problem, problem. So instead we've used a synonym. Instead of problem, we've written a particular difficulty. I decided to ask my pupils to complete a questionnaire. It's not that you just gave them a questionnaire, you asked them to complete it. I designed this myself, requesting their input on how to make the English lessons easier and more enjoyable for them. So again, we've avoided words like fun and used enjoyable. You know, grammatically, this is actually not really correct. More easy. We have a form for that. Easier. So what we see is that there's a level of sentence complexity. There's a level of vocabulary that's more advanced, and there's also more correct and specific, accurate grammar. So in summary, what characterizes academic style writing? Linking words and phrases which connect ideas fluently and smoothly, as we saw in the previous slide, unfortunately, right? Accurate grammar, punctuation, and spelling. More academic or formal vocabulary. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Overall readability. I always advise my students to read their writing out loud to themselves. And then they can hear if something sounds ugly or awkward, or indeed if there are mistakes in the accuracy. And less repetition in sentence structure and word choice. So again, building a larger vocabulary so that you don't have to repeat the same words over and over. So your words are more varied and that you're able to vary your sentence structure as well. So again, if you're looking for advice on that, watch the videos on my channel that deal with sentence structure. Use linking words and phrases to improve your written fluency. Native speakers use these very easily. We use them all the time to show examples, to illustrate, for instance, to demonstrate, to indicate a result or an effect, accordingly, consequently, therefore, to compare or contrast. However, on the other hand, to summarize, to sum up, overall, to conclude, thus, given these facts, and to indicate a cause or a reason, because of, due to, it's just a small selection, to indicate a purpose or reason why. So with this in mind, in order to indicate a specific time frame or a shift, a transition from one time period to another, simultaneously, first, second, eventually, currently, subsequently, which is a synonym for, where was it? Consequently, subsequently. And if you want to show more information, furthermore, in addition, just a small selection. All right, so different forms of writing. How do we approach formal and more academic, professional sounding writing? Well, one tip is to remember to use the correct tone, whether informal, formal, or neutral, to best address your target reader. Who are you writing for? Who are you writing to? If it's informal language, Phrases such as, he checked up on his accountant, they put up with their neighbors, she caught on very quickly, she made up for it with an early night, he went down with a fever, and the cost of living went up are acceptable on an informal level. However, if you are writing at a more formal level, instead of checked up on, you use a word like investigated his accountant. They tolerated their neighbors. She understood very quickly. She compensated for it with an early night. He contracted a fever. The cost of living increased. The cost of living rose. Now, what's the general rule here? Phrasal verbs, check up on, put up with, are less formal and less academic. These words, which are of Latinate origin, are considered more formal or academic. So learn them. Create a collection of them for yourself. I'll show you where you can do that. Another important part of developing your writing skills is to improve and enhance your level of formality in a word choice. So, for example, when you're writing for academic purposes, try to avoid words like maybe and really. Which words could you use instead? That's right. Instead of maybe, the word perhaps sounds more formal. Instead of really, words like very, truly, considerably will sound more academic and professional. What I often see in students writing is phrases like back in the day, maybe, oh, it's way more difficult, a lot of, really, hardly ever. These are generally words to and phrases to avoid. Don't use these. Instead of back in the day, you could use in the past, perhaps, much more, considerably more. A lot of could be a great deal of, much, many. Really could be very, truly. And hardly ever is probably better written as infrequently. So here we've got a nice list of words that are quite informal. Avoid these. Things like stuff, kids, cops, okay, great, cool, stupid, crazy, dumb, sick of, fed up with. These all sound too much like spoken English. So these are more formal variations which would be used quite specifically in writing. So this list, and sorry for the typo there, is more neutral. And this, instead of stuff, items, possessions, relatives, infants, offspring, youths, right? Adolescents. Acceptable, satisfactory, excellent, exemplary, unsatisfactory, unacceptable. You see quite clearly that these words sound more smart, I suppose. And again, how can you learn these kinds of words? Well, one bit of advice is to read and listen to more academic style language. But we'll get to that in just a sec. All right. Here's a paragraph which is full of errors, and it does not flow logically. I'm going to give you a moment to read the paragraph. So pause the video and read the paragraph to yourself and see if you can't brainstorm some ideas as to how to help this be more readable, create a more logically readable tone. All right. Indeed. Most likely the first thing you noticed is, let's get rid of the contractions. These don't belong in academic writing. We can also create more complex sentences by combining sentences. And you'll also likely have noticed that there are a number of areas where we need commas. The commas are missing, so accurate punctuation. And I would change some of the vocabulary as well. All right, let's look at the new and improved version. Follow this simple process so that you can improve your English vocabulary. First, keep a small notebook in your pocket, purse, or backpack. You can also use a digital tablet or smartphone if you have one. You simply need a place to write useful words and phrases. I might even add to write down useful words and phrases. Second, comma, pay attention to vocabulary. However, oops, and there should be a comma here, sorry guys. However, comma, do not write a word or phrase in your notebook until you hear it 3 times. After you encounter the vocabulary item several times, you will know it is important. Next, and there should be a comma here, add information to your notebook when you go home each night. Write details that you remember. If you are uncertain about the spelling or meaning of the vocabulary, use your dictionary. Finally, review the contents of your vocabulary notebook at the end of each week because it will help you remember the new vocabulary. So this is the new and improved version. Let's look at it side by side here against the original version and see what exactly did we change. So the first thing we changed was we created one fluent sentence here. This is actually what's known as a fragment sentence. So this needs to be attached to this first sentence. We've added commas because here we have a list, pocket, purse, or backpack. So we've created a list. We've also added an appropriate comma here. All right, second comma, or secondly. However, comma. And instead of writing the number 3, which is the lazy way out, we've written, you see how lovely this looks? It looks much more readable and pleasant to the eye to have the word written out. Okay. And again, here we combined these two sentences because this, after you encounter the thing several times, well, that is a fragment. That's not a complete sentence. So we've combined it with a comma. Next comma. All right. Write details that you remember. If you are, instead of saying if you aren't sure, if you are uncertain about, use your dictionary. And at last doesn't make sense in this context. At last is more like for stories, okay, in literature. At last, the cowboy reached the town. At last, the villagers were saved. But in an academic style, a word like finally is a better choice, comma. All right. So, as I said, lastly, finally, comma, remember that what you put in is what you produce. That is to say, if you read and listen to more academic style language, you will be more likely to produce that same style. How could you start doing that? Well, you could give this website a go. It's the BBC, and it's Learning English. Go the Distance, Academic Writing. There's a hyperlink in my PowerPoint here that will not be visible in the video, but I'll put it in the comments. This is a great site. This is also a helpful website to use regularly. English vocabulary exercises. The AWL is the Academic Word List. And again, I will put these links in the comments to this video. I sincerely hope that this has helped. And I sincerely thank you for watching. Bye.